Good afternoon, evening, or whenever you may be listening to this podcast. Welcome to the very first episode of Zollypod. We're really excited to get this thing on the ground. We've been working on it for about 6 months, so we're really looking forward to getting going. I am your host, Preston Moore. I'm joined by my co-host, Carson Terrell. Carson, what's up?
Hey, Preston. It is so great to finally be speaking to you officially after 6 months of getting this off the ground. And I am so excited for our first episode today, and also just, sort of informing people what this show is going to be about, what we're all about, and what we hope to sort of get out of the show and, learn and talk about movies every week. So, yeah, lots to get into, and we can kind of start with who are you, Preston, and where do you come from, and how did you end up on this podcast?
Carson, that's a great question. And for anybody who's listening who doesn't know, we do have a podcast trailer that's out right now. If you're listening to this, go take a listen. We get more in depth about what Zollypod means and all of that crazy stuff as well, and more introductions into our own past. But my name is Preston, like we mentioned. I'm a sports reporter in Texas, Amarillo, Texas, to be specific. But I also love to talk about movies. And one of my favorite things about movies is the people that I've met through movies, one of them being you, Carson. We met on Twitter, online. It's been years now. I think 3-4 years maybe since we've known each other. Obviously, we've met in person a couple times, but it's been a great time getting to talk movies with you, and I'm really excited to do it on a podcast finally with you.
Absolutely. And as far as myself goes, I am a video creator from the Kansas City area. I make videos and film things for a living, kind of the commercial business corporate video scene, but my true passion is movies, and as that is where I sort of found my circle on Twitter and everything, and met some wonderful friends like Preston himself here. And yes, we love to talk movies, love to look at the box office reports every weekend, what's in the news with movie news, who's directing what, who's acting and what. But this is really going to be a new space for us to kind of experiment with a different format and try to push ourselves to review things and talk about current news, but also sort of dive into what movies mean to people, and specifically the people that work in movies and how it functions as both a career and sort of an artistic outlet, and what it's like to work in movies these days. One of the things we're going to talk about later in this episode is what's going on with the strike and why it's important to put some context around it as we review the two most recent releases this weekend. And as theaters are roaring this weekend, there's some important stuff to talk about just as industry as a whole. But we're going to do some fun stuff before we get to that, including a very special format that Preston has informed me. I'm not going to spoil what that exactly is, but we will get into it later in the episode. So definitely stick around for the little fun segment we have planned.
Yeah, we got all kinds of good stuff coming for you on this podcast. Like Carson mentioned, we're going to talk to people who are making the movies that we know and love. So that's really exciting, getting to talk to people who are on the sets of these movies, not necessarily in the audience, but on the sets of these movies and actually in the process of making it, because it takes so many people to make a movie. Like you mentioned, Carson, the strike going on as well. We'll get to that later in the episode, but you mentioned the two big releases of this weekend. This is maybe the biggest weekend at the movies in a decade, maybe. It's a really, really monumental thing going on right now with Barbenheimer. That is Barbie and Oppenheimer. If you don't live under a rock, you know what I'm talking about. And if you're listening to this podcast, you certainly know what I'm talking about. So I just want to kind of get into it. Let's start off with Barbie. That's the one that I watched first. I believe it's the one you watched first too, right, Carson?
Yes. So we should probably preface that neither of us went for the ambitious Barbenheimer double feature. I applaud all of you listening who, were at the theaters for 7 hours, depending on how long your break was. Were you getting food in between? What were you doing when you were doing the Barbenheimer? Were you dressed up? All these caveats with the Barbenheimer double feature. However, I decided to see Barbie Friday evening and Oppenheimer Saturday evening, and I'm actually very glad I did that, so I had time to sort of digest both films and experience them as their individual counterparts. But man, this was a fun time at the movies, especially with Barbie. Mm-hmm. I had cheering in my theater. I don't know if you did. It was a sold out screening.
Yeah.
basically all the auditoriums at my local theater, local AMC, were pretty filled. People were buying concessions. The lines were long. I haven't seen it like this probably since No Way Home came out in December 2021. And I think the numbers came in this morning for the box office, and I believe the combined gross of all the movies at the domestic box office this weekend makes this the fourth highest weekend of all time at the domestic box office, which is pretty insane. And another important caveat with that is I think Barbie's domestic gross, it opened to $155 million this weekend for the 3-day opening. And that only accounted for about 50% of the total domestic box office. Normally, when you have a big Marvel movie come out, a big blockbuster, that can eat anywhere up to 70 to 90% of the total box office, depending on how people are viewing the competition and what people are going to see. But we're seeing that a lot of people saw different movies this weekend, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's really incredible. You mentioned $155 million domestically. That's the biggest opening ever for a female director, the biggest opening ever for a movie based on a toy, the biggest opening ever for Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling. Really incredible stats, because when you think about especially the Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling stat, I think about that the most, because when you think about all the movies that these two actors have been in, I mean, these are A-list stars. They've been A-list stars for quite some time, and for Barbie to be their biggest opening of all time, it speaks to where the movie theater industry is right now. Post-pandemic, there was a lot of question marks coming out of the pandemic. Are movie theaters going to be able to survive in their current state? We've kind of seen not really, to be honest. They've changed a little bit with how quickly things are releasing on digital and on DVD. There's a much smaller window in between theatrical release and at home release. But this is a really great sign for movie theaters. I think after the pandemic, you mentioned No Way Home. I think that was the first one that we were like, okay, the movies are back. December 2021, we're fresh out of the pandemic, but people are showing up in droves to see Spider-Man No Way Home. And then Top Gun Maverick came along the following summer, and that was like the real big moment of like, okay, they're really back. But now this even more so, I believe even more so than Top Gun Maverick, which Maverick was an achievement. It was amazing. I loved that movie. But that being said, when you see two individual movies, not only both, no sequels promised to this. Obviously, Barbie is a major IP, but there's never been a big screen Barbie movie before like this. So to see these two movies specifically doing what they're doing, I think the meme virality helped, sure, leading up to it with the Barbenheimer stuff. But also, you just think about how good each movie is. I mean, they're both really great movies. And with that, I want to kind of segue into my thoughts on Barbie. I loved this movie. I really, really loved it. I knew that I would going into it. I knew that it would be pretty good. I knew I would like it, but it just really surprised me in a lot of ways. There were a lot of things that I wasn't sure how they were going to tackle with just the concept of a Barbie movie and Barbie going into the real world. There's a million ways to go. And then you think, oh, Greta Gerwig is directing this and she wrote it. This is the same woman who made Lady Bird, who made Little Women, and now she's making Barbie. Like, that's such a tone shift, I feel like, between her past filmography, and to see what she did with Barbie to make it a fun comedy accessible to everybody. I can't imagine that many people are going to go to this movie and not at least laugh a couple times. Personally, I was laughing the entire time, thanks to Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling primarily. But, to see the tone shift in her filmography to this is really, really incredible, and how she just lands the comedy aspects in this film while also having something important to say about the world. I'm not naive to know that these are two guys talking on a podcast about the most feminist blockbuster in years, but it's really impressive to see how they, brought in these real world themes underlaying the comedy. It's something that Gerwig talked about in an interview of hers. She was talking about how the reason she thinks Ryan Gosling and Margot Robbie are perfect as Ken and Barbie is because they take their characters seriously. There's an undertone of seriousness that they know what message they're projecting to the audience in this film. It's not necessarily just making fun of their characters. They are They are funny. They are lighthearted. They are spoofs. You know, Ken is supposed to be kind of dumb, and Barbie is supposed to be kind of silly and naive. But the performances themselves, Gosling and Robbie knew the message that this movie is sending, and because of that, it makes their comedy land even more, I think.
Absolutely. And I think you hit on a point that we've been missing in blockbusters lately is that sincerity piece. Even if you look at the pre-branded stuff that's kind of become the big craze of this year, right? Like the other biggest movie of this year is the Super Mario Brothers movie. That movie really isn't a narrative movie. It's a stop along nostalgia, things that you recognize. Yes, there's an overarching story. We gotta save New York or whatever is happening. But it's all about the music cues and recognizing certain things from Nintendo, and it feels very pre-branded. I was pleasantly surprised by Barbie because it really has an underlying sincere script, and quite frankly, I am shocked that this got through the studio system.
Yeah.
In my Letterboxd review, I said it's probably the most notable thing to sort of make it untouched through the studio system since probably The Matrix Resurrections.
Yeah.
And I compare those two movies because they're sort of rejecting themselves in a way, but also creating this meta narrative that isn't being meta just to say that. It's sort of interfacing with pop culture and saying, what did Barbie as a concept do to our world? What did the Matrix movies as a cultural phenomenon do to people and their understanding of media literacy and themes and what they're about and what they mean to their creators and audiences? These are two movies that grapple with a lot of things, but yet they have some great action pieces, some great comedy, a great mix of sincerity, and just overall great time at the movies. And that's what I really loved about Barbie. And it's evidently clear that Greta wants to direct movies this big. People are always wondering of like, once you have your Lady Bird, why don't you just keep making movies like Lady Bird? And it's obviously she's interested in sort of upswinging into big blockbusters, and I can't blame her. This movie was a blast, and I'm sure it was a blast to make and come together with all these amazing artists, especially like the production design, the visual effects, working with Gosling and Robbie. Like there's so much going on here that's amazing. But also as overwhelming and sort of maximalist as it is, there's a lot of good, quiet scenes in here that you wouldn't really see in a lot of blockbusters sometimes. You know, you can imagine the studio executive being, hey, we need to cut this for time. There's nothing happening in the scene. All of those scenes are there in this movie, and it's awesome to see. And it was just, by the end of the movie, I was almost choking up in the scene where she's talking to, I believe it's Ruth, right? The creator of, the inventor of Barbie. In that scene, sort of the Deathly Hallows Part 2 train station vibes, if you will.
Yeah, very much.
But man, it's a touching scene, and it really wraps the whole movie in a bow. I just had a great time with this movie. I'm like, and people started clapping at the end, and it just, you felt like you were in the cultural moment, but you also felt like narratively this movie followed through and told its story, which I think is so important. Like, it wasn't just the memes that made this movie popular. Like, it's genuinely a good movie.
Yeah.
Which I think is why we're
is.
seeing audiences embrace it tenfold this weekend, when 4 months ago people said, oh, this is going to open to $40 million, and now look where we are.
Right. It's really, really impressive that they were able to take that sincerity, because you mentioned that I don't know that that's something a lot of blockbusters do. I think, and Marvel is the best example of this because they have been the king of the box office for the last 15 years or so. And to be honest, when you think about Marvel movies, a lot of them don't really have that sincerity. Some of them do. I'm not going to say that they don't. There are a lot of great Marvel movies that fully embrace it. But at the same time, there are a lot of Marvel movies that make fun of themselves quite a lot. And there are a lot of Marvel movies that don't really embrace the sincerity long enough. You know, I think about a couple recent examples: Thor: Love and Thunder, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Those two movies to me didn't really embrace the sincerity except for just little bits at a time. You know, little moments where they kind of got to the emotional core. This movie really has something to say about the world, and it's not afraid to say it. That's one of my favorite things about this movie. The monologue that America Ferrera's character gives in Weird Barbie's House, basically, just going on about her experience as a woman, I thought that was so powerful. And as she just kept going in that scene, she just kept going in that monologue. It kept going. And the whole time I was like, oh my gosh, like this is really, really impressive. I mean, they're not hiding away at all. Once you get to that point, there's no subtext of what the messaging is. You know, Greta Gerwig is very blatantly saying, hey, this is what the movie's about. This is what this has all been about. Yeah, we've had a good time with Ken and Barbie, but this is the message I'm trying to convey. This is why this movie is important, and that's what I thought was great. I think that it's going to have some serious potential come Oscar season. You know, we're still a bit of a ways away, but I think it's a lock for production design nomination easily. I think Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling both have really good chances. I would say America Ferrera has a good chance as well to be nominated in their respective categories. Gosling really might pull it off, to be honest. And it's something that's interesting to me. I was talking to a coworker at work recently about it, and because the Oscars a lot of the times don't respect comedies, I think, the way that they should. The same with horrors and with superhero or action movies. A lot of times these genres don't get as much respect come awards season. But this movie is a comedy, again, with something to say about the world. And I think that that's the key point. And I think that that's what's going to give it a chance come Oscar season compared to other comedies like it, and other major IP movies like it, is this movie has something to say about the world, and it says it really, really well. I think it's probably in my top 10 on the year so far. It probably in my top 5. I don't know if it'll stay there. I definitely have seen a couple better movies than it this year already, but I'd put it above most other movies that I've seen. And again, Gosling, Robbie, and Ferrera, and just the whole cast is absolutely incredible. Almost every joke landed for me. Carson, where do you see this kind of going with awards potential come the end of the year, and where do you think it ranks in your 2023 rankings so far?
Yeah, so let me start with my rankings. It's definitely in my top 5 of the year right now. I've only seen about 20 movies this year, so I gotta catch up on some things. But yeah, on the awards seasons front, it's very interesting. We'll talk about this later, but the studios are starting to, because of the strike, mitigating some of the fall schedule as sort of collateral for the 2024 movie release calendar. And I would say that actually gives this movie better chances, because with less things in the fall and the prime Thanksgiving through Christmas type awards movie release schedule, if that shifts, this could very well be the Top Gun Maverick of the summer that sort of carries both cultural momentum but also technical prowess that's respected by the voters here that make up these bodies. And I think it definitely is going to be in the mix. Now, 4 months from now, I could be saying, oh, absolutely not anymore. Like, something has clearly taken front runner, whatever it is. But right now, it's definitely having sort of that initial Top Gun Maverick cultural buzz. And also, it's arguably more for quadrant than Top Gun Maverick was. Top Gun Maverick had a very specific audience that grew into a younger audience, but this is a younger and female audience that is getting engaged with this movie. And I think that is both important and also different than last summer, which may give it even more awards potential as sort of a different rung of the experience that people had with this. And also, like you said, just the cultural and societal things it's saying with its themes. So it'd be very interesting to see where this goes, and also where this would even go for a sequel, like blockbusters in general. It's so interesting because I think the success formula for this movie is let a filmmaker with a point of view write a script and don't chop it to bits, and let their point of view shine through and let them direct the movie and sort of be that helping hand. You know what? If someone can convince me that has an interesting point of view on a Hot Wheels movie or whatever other Mattel property follows the success of this, I am all game if we just let filmmakers make crazy big movies and they sort of get out in the world untethered from traditional sort of studio debauchery that sometimes happens when these movies and the level of spending that happens on these movies occurs.
I think as far as sequel possibilities go, I certainly would imagine that Warner Brothers is already wanting one. I don't know if it will happen. I know Ryan Gosling is kind of averse to sequels in his career, and I don't know if he'll want to do that. But that being said, with the amount of positive PR that he's gotten from his quote-unquote Kenergy, I wouldn't be surprised if he wants that. And like you said, if they can cook up a sequel similar to Barbie, where you have a specific vision carried out by a talented filmmaker with minimal studio interference, I'm all game. I'm there. I don't know if that'll happen. I don't know if a sequel will happen. So much is up in the air right now with the strikes, but I don't know if a sequel will happen, but I would be shocked if Warner Brothers isn't already wanting one, just based off of the early returns for this movie with the box office. Money talks, and money is king, and that's what matters the most to the studios. And
as the Barbie movie pokes fun at, which is great,
right?
It pokes fun at Mattel, the studio system, just capitalist consumption in general, and people sort of vying after this, like, oh my gosh, we had to have the latest Barbie, we had to have this, we had to have this. So it would be great if the sequel somehow explored like the success of this movie in a way, and not in like a kind of Deadpool break the fourth wall way, although this movie did have an amazing fourth wall break with the narrator and Helen Mirren saying note to the filmmakers. It was incredible. One of my favorite actually the biggest laugh in the theater for sure was that moment by far. But it's going to be interesting to see. I think Gerwig is going on to do Narnia movies for Netflix, or at least one of them. She wants to direct a huge fantasy movie, which is freaking cool. I can't wait to see what that becomes, and I hope that she has all the success with that, because I do love that franchise, and I'm dying to see a new and better adaptation of it. So we'll see where that goes. But yeah, I think it would be a huge opportunity to bring another female writer-director in here and get a crack at it.
Definitely. I think, it would be really interesting. We'll see what happens as far as the sequel goes. But like I said, I can't imagine that WB isn't already wanting one to happen. With that being said, Barbie out of the way, I want to get into Oppenheimer now, because that movie, the second part of the doubleheader that neither of us did, I can't imagine what it must have been like for anyone who saw Oppenheimer first and then had to go directly into Barbie afterward. Because if you've seen both of these movies, the main thing that I took away from Oppenheimer, beyond it being one of the best movies that I've ever seen personally, the main thing I took away from it is, before the movie came out, Christopher Nolan came out and he said, audiences have left this movie devastated and unable to speak, were his words. To me, when he said that before the movie, I'm like,
it's just jargon, marketing, whatever.
It's hyperbole to market his movie. You can't blame him. It is what it is. I'm sure it'll be good. It's Christopher Nolan, but this has got to be hyperbole. And then I watched it, and he was not hyperbolizing anything. I think he was warning us, because that is exactly what happened. I got out of Oppenheimer, and that last hour of that movie is so enthralling and also sickening in the best ways. I don't even know if that's the right way to say it. I got out of that movie and I thought, this is why movies exist, in all of the worst yet important ways. You know what I mean? It makes you feel devastated. It makes you feel just really not great about the world after watching that movie, but that without the power of this art form, how are we going to get this? How are we going to get a feeling like this? How are we going to have something sink in like this without the power of filmmaking? And I think that that's what Christopher Nolan was certainly intending with this movie. For a movie that is 90% just people talking, he's done action movies in the past. He's done a lot of different things. He's done Interstellar, a space movie. He's had movies with all different kinds of components. He's done a Batman trilogy. It's just, to do this movie now, there is some big action scenes. Obviously, the big one that everybody's talking about, the Trinity test, the nuke, the actual time when they explode the atomic bomb on screen, is a huge moment. Arguably one of the best moments of the film. But beyond that, everything else in the movie is kind of just people talking. And if you don't have an airtight script with pacing that just goes and goes and goes and goes at a slightly like it's a fast-paced movie, but it's not too fast. You don't get lost. It's fast enough to make the 3 hours feel like 2.5. I think somewhere along the line, 30 minutes kind of just disappeared in that movie because throughout it, you just feel so engaged.
And I think I know why I felt so engaged, because I'm with you. And I think the genius of this movie is, right, this is his first biopic, right? Like, this is, based on this novel and, obviously based on Robert Oppenheimer's life and the different events that were happening with World War II. But this movie throws out the biopic formula and says, I'm not going to be a passive observer and just sort of hit the timeline of like, okay, in 1943 this happened, and oh my gosh, look what happened now. We're never zoomed out and getting the full picture. We're
in his head.
Yeah, like in the trenches with Robert Oppenheimer's sort of paranoia, moral, just kind of suffering. He's literally withering against, and also trying to cope with this idea that he's given all of this control. He's a scientist, and it's sort of eating away at his person, but yet he is sort of emboldened by this individual power of American exceptionalism, of all these things that he, is sort of like, oh, we need to do this. There's no other way around this. We have to do this. And obviously there's things ideologically motivating him, everything with the Nazi Germany and everything that's happening. But we mostly stay on him and how the people around him sort of crumble as well. It's not a great experience to be him and going through this. And he is just the visuals and the sound design and everything that get to this level of the bomb not even being the big signifying set piece. It's like we have all these other things. I think one of the most impactful scenes for me was the scene in the gym after the test, or after they officially after they officially dropped the bomb. And you just sort of hear the pounding of the shoes on the bleachers, and it creates this horrifying subjective experience. And I think there's one scream in the movie. I think there's a single scream in this movie, and it's implemented brilliantly. Zooming out from that, we don't see the actual bombings. I think it was so smart. I think a worse movie would have relied on having to like show the actual events that happened in Japan. We get it from his perspective at home and the paranoia of what it actually did. And even when they're looking at the aftermath of the pictures, we're just locked in on Cillian Murphy reacting in horror to this momentum that sort of stumbled onto itself. And he ultimately couldn't stop, but also was just sort of disregarded in the whole American defense and government community as a whole. Like, it was just so fascinating to watch that. And then to combine that with the psychological thriller, I thought was the genius of this movie, because it takes, like you said earlier, a lot of this movie is just talking in rooms, but you understand the tension and the horror of everything very well because you're so deep into the mindset of all these people. And it really does earn its 3 hours, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think one of the most shocking things to me was the way the movie builds. It very much feels like it's building to this climactic event of the Trinity test. It feels like it's building to this event of, okay, we're actually going to set the bomb off. Here we go.
But then that ends at the second act. Like, that is the end of the second act, which is kind of insane to think about.
Right. There's another hour after that. And to me, after the Trinity test, there was a brief moment, like in my mind, just a fleeting thought that came through my mind. I was like, how much longer is this movie going to be? Mm-hmm. And I think that probably a lot of people felt that way. And I feel that way in a lot of movies that I think are too long. I don't think Oppenheimer's too long. I thought that very briefly after the Trinity test, when I realized, oh, this is going to keep going. There's more story to tell here. And we're not even going to show, like you mentioned, the actual bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I think that, like you mentioned, it speaks to the quality of the movie. It speaks to the goal that Nolan had to tell Oppenheimer's story. He said he thinks he's the most important person in human history. And I think it only further hammers in the point that we don't see what happened in Japan. It only further hammers in the point that we see an American official say, "Oh, we can't bomb Kyoto. My wife and I honeymoon there."
Right.
And that's an actual thing that happened. That really happened. I researched everything after the movie because I was so
just categorically
interested.
insane. And also,
Yeah.
off that point of like nobody making the decisions on the ground in America understood the gravity of the situation.
I feel like it only emboldens the point they're trying to make whenever you don't show what happens
Yep.
in Japan, because to these people, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, what they're doing, this is a faraway land. They don't realize the gravity of what's happening in that moment. They don't realize the gravity of the decision that they're making and what it is going to do to the world. Had they shown everything that happened, I don't know that that point would have been made quite as much. I think it's just far more impactful to see everything that happened behind the scenes, behind closed doors here, with the decision makers of what actually happened and how they came to the conclusion to do what they did.
And he has this idea
that, I think,
he has this idea that it's all going to work out perfectly, and all of a sudden everybody's just going to understand that we can never do this again, and that all this science breakthrough is for the greater security of the world, to make people understand this cannot be where we stand. Like, war cannot function like this. We can't do this. We'll all die.
Yeah.
And then the genius of that last hour is to say, oh no, we actually as an American defense institution don't care about that. We care about what is the next threat. And I think there's a line by Benny Safdie in this movie of like, until they build a bigger bomb. Like, that's the scary part about this, is it's a drop in the bucket for what's next. It's always what's next. What's the next threat? Who's threatening from the other side of the world? And that's what makes the ending montage so genius to me. And one of the most just heart-wrenching things is we have all these politicians who are self-important and think that they're making the decisions that matter. But really, from a truth perspective, the scientists are the only ones here that, even with Oppenheimer being sort of dragged through the mud and sort of corrupted his own life, he's the only one that had that exchange with Einstein saying, like, I think we unleashed something. They weren't thinking about the political, self-important, where they were going to be, what institute, what role they were going to be. It was quite literally, they were thinking about the death of this science that has been unleashed. And from this moment, post-World War II, has continued the nuclear arms race across the world through the Cold War, through every war that it has sort of persisted since. And to your point, like, I was just sitting there after that final shot. Like, I couldn't move. Like, it was just like intoxicating, paralyzing, and shocking all at once, because it was all that information in that third act. Because keep in mind, we're cross-cutting from past, present, and future. We have black and white scenes that are like sort of the near future. It just depends like where you view it from the movie. And then like we have all this stuff going on. And by the time we get to sort of Iron Man, what's his name? Robert Downey Jr.'s breakdown. By the way, he is phenomenal in this movie. He's incredible. He's probably one of the anchors of this movie that brings the pacing and everything together, because other than Killian, him and Alden Ehrenreich, who's also phenomenal,
right?
They have a lot of screen time in this, and they're sort of the glue of bringing all this government stuff of what's happening down to this indictment and security clearance and all this crap that's going on. And then it just hits you when Rami Malek shows up and the movie hits a new gear when all of a sudden he's betraying him, and we're realizing to the extent that Oppenheimer's been thrown aside, and it's already way behind Oppenheimer. Like, the impact in the world has gone way past them, and they do not care about him anymore. And they are on to the next and bigger bomb.
Right. They're on to the next thing. And so are we. I want to jump into this segment. We've talked about how serious Oppenheimer is, and I want to lighten it up a little bit.
Please.
We're going to do a Barbenheimer draft. We are going to, basically what this is going to be, we're each going to draft 5 different actors / performances across both movies, and we're going to see who lines up with the best draft out of the two of us, out of these incredible performances. I can't think of a better time to do a segment like this where we have just so many incredible performances across the board to choose from. So Carson, with that, I want to give you the first overall pick in the Barbenheimer draft, the Zollypod inaugural Zollypod draft. We may do this again, we may not, I don't know, but I think it'll be pretty fun. Carson, I want to give you the first overall pick.
Okay, so do we each,
any actor, any performance?
We each have 5 picks for, and that's just total, right, between the two movies, and then
5 picks total.
Okay.
You'll go, then I'll go, and we'll each pick 5 times, and then we'll have our rosters. You can go ahead and go first.
Ooh, this is tough, but I think I'm going to go. I'll go Cillian Murphy just because we haven't spoke about his performance yet. What he accomplishes in this movie is just like, I don't know how you get this level of just like. It reminded me of, speaking of other performances, Ryan Gosling's performance in First Man, another sort of biopic, but also sort of like this deep dive into the psyche of, you know, this idea of the traditional American hero, and that becomes a myth, and this sort of these scientists and adventurers and different people that get put up on a pedestal. I think what Cillian did here is very impressive, down to the final line and final delivery of the theme of this movie. It's a hell of a performance, and so I'm very fine with taking him number 1 in my picks.
Yeah, he was phenomenal. I'm kind of upset that you took him off the board at 1, but I'm not surprised, nor do I blame you. With my first pick, I am going to have to go with Ryan Gosling in Barbie. I think he's one of the best comedic actors of our generation. If you haven't seen The Nice Guys, you have to go watch that movie now. It is, in my opinion, his performance in that movie is the funniest and best comedic performance of all time that I've ever seen. And frankly, his performance in Barbie is one of the only performances that can even compare to that to me. He was so funny. Every single line delivery, he just nails. He knows exactly what he's doing. And he just gave one of the performances of the year to me. So that's going to be my number 1. Carson, you can go ahead with your second round pick.
I think I'm going to take Margot Robbie for this. I think she is absolutely phenomenal. One of my favorite scenes in the movie is when she meets the daughter for the first time at the lunch table, and she sort of goes through like the 5 stages of grief. This is where she learns like truly what the real world thinks of Barbie. And she just starts like crying like after this girl roasts Barbie, and not knowing that it's actually Barbie.
Right.
But yeah, there's a lot of down to the final moments with the sort of scene with Ruth talking about, you know, who she wants to be, how she can go forward. She carries this movie in a way that's both matches the comedic chops of Gosling, but also sort of hammers home the more emotional beats to, I think, an extent that really, really benefits the movie.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say Margot Robbie is one of the last movie stars left. She
Absolutely.
is a phenomenal actor. I'm blown away in pretty much everything she does at this point. With my second round pick, I have to take him. I feel like we've gotten the big 4 off the board now. I got to go with Robert Downey Jr. in Oppenheimer. It was really awesome to see him play, you know, not a quippy, sarcastic Tony Stark character type that we've gotten so used to seeing him play since 2008. It's been 15 years. And that's pretty much the only type of character we've seen him play most of the time. And to see him take on this role was really, really awesome. I loved what he did with it. Just, I mean, you really feel the gravity of everything that his character is bringing to the table. And he's really the driving force when it comes to that last hour of the movie. That's when he really, really hammers home what he's doing, and that's when he really gets to show off his acting chops a little bit more than we've seen him do quite a lot. He's been good in some MCU movies, but he was great in this movie. He was absolutely phenomenal.
To see him be embarrassed and just sort of depraved and slimy and espionage and obviously just a very different level of performance that like you said, doesn't rely on granted amazing personality that he's able to infuse into Tony Stark and other sort of comedic, sarcastic billionaire vibes. But yeah, this was so different, and I think it worked so well. I especially love the last scene where he's talking to Alden Ehrenreich, who sort of opens the door jarringly to the press, and he sort of gets his clap back, and then he has to go out there.
Yeah.
Man, there was a lot of great performances in Oppenheimer. It's so tough to pick.
Yeah, and now you got to go. Third round. We're running short on time, so we're going to go a little bit of rapid fire here. Third round.
My third pick is, and I'll just go quick, is Emily Blunt. I think she is a mess in this movie in the best way possible.
Yeah, she's incredible.
And you can't blame her, right? Like, it's such an interesting counter perspective to the lives of these scientists and the lives that they drag through their crap, and they create just this unstable force of just dynamics with their family that are just so tough to bear. And you know, he has mistresses, and he has the Florence Pugh's character and this other lady and all of this stuff going on, and a kid they're not taking care of. And she goes through this, and I just really believed her performance emotionally. And it made total sense for a lot of the emotional beats, especially going up to that final indictment scene where she really gets to shine. Just a great actress. So easily my number 3.
One of the best scenes of the movie. With my third pick, I am going to flip on back to Barbie and go with America Ferrera for that monologue that she gave. I truly don't know how she's not getting more praise right now, to be honest. I was already impressed with her performance before her monologue in Weird Barbie's house. After that, I was sold. I think she should be getting as much praise as Robert Downey Jr. right now for her performance. And I'm fully serious. I was really, really blown away by her. I think, like you mentioned, Margot Robbie really carries the emotional core of that movie as the lead, as the main character, but America Ferrera is the one that really brings it to the forefront and hammers it home, I think, and kind of gives that real world aspect of it as well, you know, from a real woman's perspective as opposed to Barbie. And I think that was really, really impressive what she did. So I'm going to have to go with her in my third overall pick. Carson, fourth round.
This is getting so tough. Man.
This is where it gets fun to me.
Yeah, see, I'm considering like funny picks, but also like good picks.
There's so many.
I'll go Michael Cera because I think he's a little bit of an underdog here, and I think he's just the amount of the comedic relief from the comedy itself, if that makes sense. And it worked so well, and I was laughing hysterically when we got to that fight scene out on the brick road with the construction workers. It was just so funny to me. And also he was playing Michael Cera, but he was also just this sort of goofball Alan character that I think it really, really hammers home the comedy of this movie. And I thought it gave an awesome performance.
Yeah, I honestly, I'm not gonna lie, taking him in the fourth round, you might have a steal there. I don't know, you might be getting a leg up on me. That's a really good pick. You're right. He was a great addition to that movie. You're right. It's getting tough, but I am gonna go with my fourth round pick. She didn't have a lot of screen time, but I got to go with Florence Pugh in Oppenheimer. She only had a couple scenes, but man, she dominated those scenes. Yeah, she was really impressive, as she's always been. I think she's one of the best movie stars, one of the best actors of the generation as well. And I think she, you know, obviously she's here to stay for quite some time in the future. But I've loved her in everything I've seen her in, and I loved her in Oppenheimer. I think she really did a great job with the limited time that she had, the limited screen time she had. It's always interesting to me to see an actor who has limited screen time in a movie but is able to make such an impact through their performance and through their line deliveries in what limited time they have to still have the impact she did. I was blown away, no pun intended, by her performance. So yeah, that's going to be my fourth round pick. Carson, last round, your last pick. Who's rounding it out for your team?
Ooh, I'm going to give a shout out to my boy Albert Einstein, Tom Conti. He's just like a breath of fresh air in this movie. Like, he's just out in nature, like just running around. Like, it's like the scientist that's past his time, but like he has all this knowledge, and it's like that's Albert Einstein. But in the time, it's like he's not even as prolific for this project, because it's like, oh, like this isn't his field, like we don't need him, which is just crazy in and of itself. But I thought his scenes with Killian were phenomenal. The final scene where we finally learn what they said to each other has just imprinted on me. So for that reason, I think he's sort of a vital piece of this for the limited screen time that he has.
Yeah, and, to your point, it's really interesting to see, Albert Einstein, I think, in popular culture in this day and age is kind of he's almost a goofy figure. You think of him as this silly German guy with crazy hair, obviously one of the smartest people of the generation, but at the same time, with the way that he's been depicted over the years, you don't think of him in a serious tone as much, especially with his accent, to be honest. His whole caricature, he's become a caricature in pop culture, I believe. And I think it was probably a pretty difficult role to take on, given the seriousness that the role entailed.
Yeah, and he tells Oppenheimer as much of, like, he was talking about the passage of time and how people were going to come around on him, and then it cuts to those handshakes, like in the White House, to an older Oppenheimer, like shaking the hands of people that sort of betrayed him in that indictment. And then the one guy, Teller, comes up and Emily Blunt doesn't shake his hand, and it's sort of talking about
good moment
how America sort of personifies its people that it's relied on, as they become more mythic celebrity than hero, or sort of a warning for whatever new innovation or experiment or cultural moment is happening. And so I think Tom Cottony really sells that, especially towards the end of the movie. So great stuff. I'm pretty happy with my top 5. Who is going to be your final pick, Preston?
This is so difficult for me, because not only do I have the final pick and I have to choose the final member of my team, but I also have to decide now who goes undrafted. And there are like, I want to pick multiple.
I know.
I want to pick multiple people in this right now, because there are multiple performances who are going to go undrafted in this draft, and it makes me sad.
The cast list on both of these, to be fair, is so deep that we could do this through 20 picks, and it would be equally as fantastic.
So with my last pick, my gut tells me to go one way, but I'm going to go another way.
Where does your heart tell you, Preston?
My heart tells me that I'm going to go with Jason Clarke as Roger Robb, basically like the prosecutor, you could say, in Oppenheimer's hearing.
He's a menace, dude. Like, my God.
He is great. He is great. And I think he's kind of, in what I've seen at least, he hasn't gotten as much, like America Ferrera, I don't think he's gotten as much attention as maybe he should have for this performance, because he is really good. And by the end of the movie, I mean, frankly, by an hour into the movie, you hate this guy. And that's the point. You're supposed to. Like you said, he's a menace. He's a nuisance. He's annoying. And you don't like him because he's evil. He's carrying out this hit job on Oppenheimer, spreading false truths about him. And it's really, I think he did a really great job. I hate to leave Alden Ehrenreich undrafted.
I know.
That is where,
that was my biggest pain point too.
I wanna get to him. I'm a fan of his. I love Solo, but I have to go with Jason Clarke. You feel for that character, not for him, but you feel at that character, right? You hate that guy.
Yeah.
And that just is a testament to his performance. So there's our Oppenheimer draft. We're going to post this and see who won, who lost. It's really such a difficult, or not Oppenheimer, the Barbenheimer draft. It's such a difficult thing to do because, man, everybody across both of these movies does a really, really great job. Before we go, we do want to mention the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strike. We actually did have a guest lined up for this episode, someone who worked on Oppenheimer. Because of the strike, though, he could not join us, and we're bummed out by that. But hopefully, once the strike is over, we can get him on the podcast. I don't want to reveal who it is right now because it would be cool to reveal who it is whenever the time comes, if we can get him on later in time. But that was pre-strike. We had him lined up, and obviously with everything that's gone on, it's become a little bit more difficult to book guests to come on podcasts, which maybe this was not the best time to launch a podcast where the point is to interview people who work on movies. But, ideally this strike doesn't last too much longer and these workers can get paid fairly. If you want to support the writers and the actors amongst this strike, Carson, how can we support these guys?
Yeah, so first things first, people that are just used to doing like YouTube and small level stuff, and I think it's just important to, one, mention the strike that it's happening, and two, just add context to everything you're saying. If you're talking about movie news, why things are moving, I think it's important to say that the studios are holding out and not coming to the negotiating table in a fair light to get a deal right now. It's not the other way around. It's not some greedy actors that are already millionaires that want more money. This is about the livelihood of all actors, and people don't realize
we're not talking about the Margot Robbies and the Ryan Goslings and the Cillian Murphys and Robert Downey Jr.'s of the world here. We're talking about the writers and actors that go unseen, that are living paycheck to paycheck and aren't getting paid residuals for what goes on in streaming services.
We are talking about
afraid of what AI could mean for this industry. So,
yeah. Absolutely. We're talking about the actors that are, for example, the guy next to the cubicle in Barbie that has one line. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
That's the actor we are talking about that should be able to get a middle class living and should be able to live in LA or live where they want without having to worry, and being able to get work in a way that's fair and equitable to everybody. So yes, just talking about it and talking about those points of view. If you would like to look at the points of view and where the issues currently stand, both the WGA and SAG-AFTRA have released their points document that breaks down what their proposals were, what the studios, aka the AMPTP, which is just a collective negotiating arm for them, has responded. And then also you can donate to things like the Entertainment Community Fund, which is formerly the Actors Fund, which helps people that are most affected by the strike, people who are, were already financially unstable before this strike because of the scenarios in which work has operated in this industry. You can go ahead and support things like that, and then just paying attention on social media to what the WGA and SAG is saying about the strike, any updates, any requests that they may have right now. Like, we're reviewing Oppenheimer and Barbie. There has been no general sort of don't go see movies, don't watch TV shows. It's more of thinking about your sphere of influence and thinking how you're getting paid and who you're getting paid by. And there's a lot of unknowns, so just be cognizant of everything you're doing. We just wanted to talk about that quickly at the end of this podcast. Preston, do you have anything to add on that? I know there's a ton of tough questions around this. Like you said, of course we're launching a podcast during this time.
Terrible time to launch podcasts to have people who work on movies be interviewed. But rest assured, in the future, we will have filmmakers on this podcast. I guarantee it. We're already in touch with a couple to line up for future episodes. Unfortunately, with the strike, it may be a little bit longer than that. But I do want to talk about the strike, but I might have to save it for our next episode, which will be 2 weeks from the release of this episode. If you listen to our podcast trailer, you know that we will have bi-weekly episodes every Wednesday. Every other Wednesday, I guess, is what bi-weekly means. So that's when you can find our next episode. With that, we're going to wrap things up. Follow Zollypod on all social medias. We are on everything. Twitter, Instagram, Threads, if that takes off, Facebook, TikTok. We're going to launch that soon as well. Zollypod, ZOLLYPOD. Follow us there. You can follow me at Preston C. Moore on all platforms as well. Carson, where can they find you?
You guys can follow me at The Film Carson on Twitter. Check me out on Twitter, Letterboxd, that sort of thing for movie takes in between episodes and see what we're watching. And maybe it's hinting at what our new episodes may be at. Maybe it's not. We hope to surprise you, and we hope to sort of build a community with you guys. So we're very excited to do that in the coming weeks and months. As Preston said, make sure you are following our social media accounts. Make sure you spread the word when our first episode comes out. Again, refer back to our podcast trailer for more information. If you're curious about how this podcast came about, what the heck does Zollypod mean, and other information about generally what this podcast will be about. But that's about it, Preston. Do you have anything before we take off?
That's all I got. With that, we are going to wrap up, and we will see you next time. Thank you for listening to our first episode of Zollypod. Like I said, make sure you follow us everywhere, and we will see you next time, and we'll see you at the movies.